Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, Assistant Sports Editor for Multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, in for Christopher Carter on the Friday edition of the North Shore Drive that we're moving to Thursday. Jason Mackey is off this week, so my usual show with him is off. Brian Batko, our Steelers insider, is here. You usually do the North Shore Drive with Chris on Fridays, but with the holiday and Chris's pending nuptials, he won't be around. So we're just kind of doing a Frankenstein show here.
Yeah, Chris will be off for a while, tying the knot, taking the plunge. I'll be in Virginia Beach next week, so I will be off the grid as well. But yeah, I mean, we might as well sort of put a bow on what was a pretty wild week for the Steelers, as everybody out there, and us included, hopefully enjoys this nice 4/3 day weekend with the 4th of July falling on a Friday.
Indeed. Officially, this is the North Shore Drive podcast. So thanks to Edgar Snyder Associates for sponsoring the show. More on them in a little bit. Our big question that we're going to start the show with, Brian, is Jonnu Smith. Is he functionally the Steelers wide receiver 2, given his stats and production last season in Miami? We're going to talk a little bit in the second segment about what the Steelers do now at the safety position, with some big names still on the market. And then we've got a potpourri of topics in the third segment. Are the Steelers really being more aggressive? What are we going to make of Aaron Rodgers working out with some receivers in Malibu this week? Excited to get into all that. So, Brian, let's start with this. I set up the Jonnu Smith conversation. He had 88 catches for 884 yards a year ago with the Miami Dolphins. That would have put him first on the Steelers in catches and second in yardage behind George Pickens by only 16 yards. That's 200 yards more than Pat Freiermuth had, roughly, as the Steelers' number 2 target, 300 more than Calvin Austin. So I guess the question is, Jonnu Smith is a tight end by trade, but to what extent should we be looking at him potentially as functionally a wide receiver 2 in this offense?
Yeah, I don't really necessarily want to call him that, Adam, although what you say about him being more versatile than the traditional position designation would suggest. Because if DK Metcalf is to go down, even if it's just for 2 or 3 games, like George Pickens last year, it's not like Jonnu Smith's going to be the next wide receiver up, ascending to that X receiver role. I still think the Steelers don't necessarily have that guy, but I don't know that they really care about getting that guy. So I would say he's pass catcher 2 behind DK Metcalf, or maybe 1.5 with Pat Freiermuth. I think it still kind of remains to be seen what's the pecking order now with those 2 guys. But I was thinking about this after you were texting me about some potential topics, and what I think the Steelers ideally want to be on offense now with this Jonnu Smith deal done is a better version of the 2023 Falcons offense that Arthur Smith had. Now, hold on, because that is the season that ultimately was his undoing in Atlanta. He was not brought back after that year. I think they were 26th in points per game. So in that sense, it's not really an ideal blueprint to follow. However, I bring up that team rather than some of his Titans teams because, look, I mean, they had Derrick Henry in Tennessee. In 2020, the year that got Arthur Smith promoted to a head coaching job to begin with, they had A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. So they had 2 sort of legitimate wide receiver 1 type of guys, and they both were at or near 1,000 yards. What stands out to me about the 2023 Falcons is, first of all, they had Desmond Ridder as the guy pulling the trigger there. And I think he's out of the league, if I'm not mistaken, 3 years in. So, of course, you expect Aaron Rodgers to be a huge upgrade over what I guess a second-year quarterback at that time, who was a mid-round pick. But when you look at the skill guys around Ridder that season, Drake London led them in receiving with 69 catches for 905 yards, only 2 touchdowns. Bijan Robinson, and I'm just going to kind of read you these stats devoid of context for now, and then we'll get deeper into it. Bijan Robinson, their big-time running back, was second with 58 grabs, but he had 487 yards, so a lot of short game stuff there. Kyle Pitts was second in receiving yards, do it all tight end, 667, 53 catches. Their third leading receiver was, here's a guy, Jonnu Smith, with 50 catches for 582 yards, 3 touchdowns. You have to go down to, yes, tied for 5th in catches and fifth also in yardage to get to their next receiver. And that was Mac Hollins, who was kind of known as a special teams demon, big body blocker. Then, he was the number 2 for that team. And I think the Steelers, again, with Rodgers in there, someone who should be the point guard type for this offense. We'll talk more about his basketball acumen in a little bit, but all those numbers should essentially go up if he is the maestro instead of Desmond Ridder. So I kind of think that's what Arthur Smith might be envisioning here. Maybe a few less dump offs to the running back because Bijan Robinson was that kind of pass catcher. But Jaylen Warren, Caleb Johnson, and Kenny Gainwell might form a trio that produces like that in the passing game.
Yes, that's always an option as well. I guess let me attack the question this way, Brian. Of these top possible options for the Steelers, and I'll exclude running backs from this conversation because you're probably going to have one of them out there most of the time unless they're going 5 wide. But let's just say DK Metcalf, Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Robert Woods. I guess you can throw Darnell Washington in there as well. Who plays the most snaps beyond DK Metcalf out of that group? And is it Jonnu Smith in your mind?
Yeah, I think Jonnu Smith or Pat Freiermuth. I think those two guys will be kind of neck and neck. I actually thought one of the criticisms I have of Arthur Smith from year 1 with the Steelers was taking Pat Freiermuth off the field a little bit too much. I mean, this is, you just paid him to be the guy in your tight end room for the short term and the long term. I just thought there were too many times where I'm looking down on the sideline from the press box. It could be a big moment, could just be a normal moment in a game, and Freiermuth's on the sideline with his helmet in his hand. He never complained about snap counts, targets. He just does his job and tries to be a leader for that group. But 69% of the snaps, which I think he ended up with, it, to me, is underutilizing a guy. And I think there are some questions about that now with sort of, I don't want to say recruiting over him, but, you're bringing in Jonnu Smith, who was even more productive last season and has much more of a history with Arthur Smith. So I think those two in some order should be next in snaps after DK Metcalf. The more interesting question, and I'm glad you didn't ask me because I don't know, is what receiver plays the second most snaps on this team? Because when you pull up your fantasy football roster, Jonnu Smith's going to be listed as a tight end there. So regardless of how they're using him, on paper, looking at a depth chart, I don't know if it's going to be Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Robert Woods. I don't think it'll be Robert Woods, but you never know. Could Ben Skoranek kind of wiggle his way in there because of doing the dirty work? I think he's probably more useful as a jack of all trades, but I'd say it's probably between Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin for who emerges as that guy, unless there's somebody else behind door number 3 that Omar Khan's going to surprise us with another trade while we're all off enjoying some vacation time here.
Yeah, you set me up well, Brian, for the next question, which is, can we or should we let go of the Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Gabe Davis, Alan Lazard conversation that we've been periodically returning to since they finally got the deal done with Aaron Rodgers? I am getting the sense that ship has probably sailed for most of those guys. I know last week I was talking with Jason about how Keenan Allen even said he doesn't want to come to Pittsburgh on a live stream.
He left himself a little bit of an out at the end there.
Yeah, when I said to Jason, I don't think live streams are canon. So that was my thought as well. But what do you think? Is there a chance any of those guys still come here with Jonnu Smith in the fold?
Here's what I would tell you. I wouldn't bet on it because I think there's something to be said for maybe with Rodgers at the helm, you don't necessarily need this clearly defined 1, 2, 3 wide receiver hierarchy. I mean, what is his reputation? He doesn't care who the ball is going to. As long as you are where you're supposed to be, you're running good routes, you are on the same page as him, you're running the red line if you're Mike Williams in the Jets so he can throw a no-look pass to the backside. Like, that's all he really cares about. And if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound with Aaron Rodgers in 2025 as the Steelers offense goes. So I think that does lessen the traditional need for, hey, what's up with the individual talent amassed here at a most important position? Omar Khan is falling into the same trap as he did a year ago with not much depth behind George Pickens. I think that's less of a concern. So again, I wouldn't bet on another big time receiver coming in here, but I will just offer the caveat that this offseason, the last few off seasons, the Steelers have been running this thing like they are fantasy football managers, and they do kind of go out and make the big move that you don't think is in their DNA. It all is now. So I'm not going to discount any of those possibilities.
Brian, let's get out of this segment with a quick game of over-under for some guys in this offense. We'll start with Smith. Do you think he goes over or under any of his Miami totals from a year ago? So just to repeat them, 88 catches, 884 yards, and 8 touchdowns.
Cool, boy. I'm gonna go under just because I think that was such a pass-centric offense under Mike McDaniel. I know he's good with the run schemes as well, but I think this Steelers offense is going to be much more of a run-first identity.
Pat Freiermuth over under his 65 catches for 653 that he put up last year.
What were his touchdowns?
One moment, please. 7 touchdowns.
That's a tough number to hit. I'll say the unders again, just because they certainly upgraded the number 2 tight end, if you want to call Jonnu Smith that. And I think DK Metcalf is probably better than George Pickens. So I'll go under for Pat as well.
Last one will go.
Not by much.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think he's still going to be involved. And like you said, they might be neck and neck. So that would make sense statistically. If you think Smith's going to be down, you would think Freiermuth would have a chance to at least keep his head, treading water. Calvin Austin will be the last one here. He had 36 catches, 548 yards. Is he maybe the biggest loser in the situation?
I don't know. I think, if he does emerge as that kind of de facto second wide receiver, will there be more screen game opportunities for him? Will he be the one running a quick speed out and, okay, you need 4 yards. He catches that for 5 and helps you move the chains. I actually think I might go over on the catches for Calvin Austin. And sure, we'll go over on yards too, since I faded those other 2 guys a little bit. But it's definitely difficult and tricky to predict how many balls there are going to be to go around for the Steelers pass catching core in 2025.
Yeah, I think the difficult thing to evaluate here with the Steelers is how many more times they're going to throw with Aaron Rodgers, and are there just going to be more targets available than there were for guys who were on the team last season versus this season. So that'll be interesting to watch play out. We are going to talk about the safety situation on the other side of this break. Will the Steelers make a move there between now and training camp with some interesting names remaining on the market? What's it all mean for DeShon Elliott after his extension? I think that was last week. Before we get into that, we want to thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Edgar Snyder Associates. Law firms come and go, but what law firm has been here in Western PA fighting for injury victims for more than 40 years? It's Edgar Snyder Associates. What firm has a staff of over 130 people who live and work here? It's Edgar Snyder Associates. Law firms come and go, but Edgar Snyder Associates is a name you can always trust. So remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. If you've been hurt in an accident, call them at 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit edgarsnyder.com. They're available 24/7, and we'll be right back. Second segment here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner in for Christopher Carter with Brian Batko. We're talking about Steelers safeties after Minka Fitzpatrick was traded away. Steelers Depot, our friends over there, noted that some of the better remaining free agents are safeties: Justin Simmons, Julian Blackmon, Marcus Williams. I believe there was an ESPN list that had the 17 top free agents remaining. Those guys were 3 of them. Do any of them intrigue you, Brian? And might any of them intrigue the Steelers in the absence of Minka Fitzpatrick? I know there's been conversation about, is Jaylen Ramsey going to slide in at safety? next to DeShon Elliott. You obviously added Juan Thornhill. So it's not as if the cupboard is completely bare without Minka Fitzpatrick, or they probably wouldn't have made this trade. However, I think it's a natural question to ask just because there does seem to be value still on the market.
Yeah, Jordan Whitehead is another name that I don't think you mentioned there. But yeah, I mean, anybody can pull up a list of the available free agents out there. So Marcus Williams, I mean, it really went south for him last year with the Ravens. So I think I would probably trust the Ravens' talent evaluations on someone like him who's getting up there in age. Justin Simmons for the Falcons is like the biggest name of everybody who's available at that position. But man, I hate to speak in absolutes and be reductive like this, Adam, but I almost think Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan need to be given a no more 30-plus-year-old players role. Like, it's just, you're at your cap. You're at the quota. I know it's never that simple. Some guys have more gas left in the tank than others, and age is just a number and all of that, but they are getting dangerously close to, like, come on, really? Just call it. That's enough. You've hit the limit. So, plus, I don't think, I mean, just reading some Falcons writers from last season, I don't think he was quite the addition that they thought he was going to be. Their defense was horrendous down the stretch. Jesse Bates is the other safety. You know, he wasn't the problem. So I worry a little bit about Justin Simmons, and especially because anybody that you look at here, I think it does have to be someone who can be that center fielder and play the Minkah role. I mean, DeShon Elliott's really good at what he does, but that's playing more in the box, stuff in the run, matching up with tight ends. I don't know if Julian Blackmon might be the one that is the most intriguing to me. He's the youngest of the group. Now, he was dealing with a shoulder injury all last season with the Colts. I would assume that's a big reason why he's still out there, considering he played and started all last year. But, I mean, he was a decently high draft pick. You know, he has a lot of free safety in his background. I would look into his health and at least maybe bring him in as the biggest thing is, you know, I don't know that any of these guys are real upgrades over Juan Thornhill. I think they're all kind of in the same tier as Juan Thornhill. So if you can get someone for a fairly cheap price and have them compete with Thornhill or at least be the backup to Thornhill, that might be ideal because there's really no one behind him. I mean, Miles Killebrew is the furthest thing from a free safety in the traditional sense. He's more of a hybrid linebacker. Sebastian Castro, the undrafted free agent from Iowa, that's not his strong suit either. The other, you know, X factor here maybe is Jaylen Ramsey going to be doing a lot more of that than he has in the past, or is there some other member of the Steelers secondary that the Steelers coaches have plans for to help out more at safety? I don't know. That all remains to be seen. Those questions remain to be answered, but I wouldn't fault them at all if they went out and added another veteran with experience at that position. Again, if the price is right.
What do you think the confidence level is in Juan Thornhill? Because I think a lot of people interpreted that move as just kind of roster churn, you know, acquiring just a body. But then he was, you know, had some interesting interviews at OTAs. Seen, you know, other people were talking about him throughout that week. I think he stood out to you a little bit. So what do you think the view of him is internally, even if people externally maybe are not really paying that much attention?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was only 3 days of mini camp, so I don't know that there was a ton that he could have done. That I hesitate to think it was this, you know, this eureka moment for the coaches that like, oh wow, Juan Thornhill is a lot better than we expected. Let's go trade Minkah now. I tend to think that was probably simmering, especially when you look back. Remember all the draft tracker videos we did in April, and you're kind of like, why are the Steelers this interested in Nicky Manwari, the safety from South Carolina, or like they're whining and dining Malachi Starks down in Georgia? I think there were a couple other safeties who were on their radar that either came in for visits. And it was just at the time, it was like, positionless football. Well, now in retrospect, maybe it was a little bit of planning for life without Minkah, had those trade offers come in a little bit sooner than Miami's interest. So Thornhill, I think, is fine, but I've got to look at him through a whole different lens than I did when he was signed, because at that point I'm thinking, okay, he's the new DeMonte Casey. He's the third safety in that package that allows you to give Minkah some more position flexibility, move him around the formation. Or he's going to occasionally be like a slot defender to try to disguise things against offenses. If he's out there playing more like 80 to 90% of the snaps or more versus, 25 to 35, then I have to recalibrate. So I don't know really where he's going to fit in. I know Browns fans were very down on his play last year. He said it was because he had a recurring calf injury. I think that's sort of a catch-22 because it's like, okay, you can blame a rough season on that, but we also have to wonder, are you going to stay healthy in 2025 if this secondary is banking on you?
Yeah, and I think the question of depth is probably where I, most wonder what they're going to do with this position, because to me, it all seems well and good with the Jalen Ramsey talk and the Juan Thornhill talk until DeShon Elliott gets hurt, until he has to miss a couple weeks, which he did, I believe, at different points last season.
Yeah, he had a hammy or a groin. I mean, who didn't on the last season Steelers? And the other thing too, though, Adam, is always keep in mind that cut down day will arrive here in August, and if there's other decent players out there who get caught in a numbers game, the Steelers could always swoop in and grab somebody like that as well to bolster the safety spot.
We are going to get into the Steelers and their aggressiveness level. Has it really changed? Have our expectations not changed fast enough? Some philosophical questions in the third segment. We're also going to be talking about Aaron Rodgers working with his pass catchers this coming week in Malibu, out in California, and then maybe even talk a little bit about what we expect to hear from Jaylen Ramsey if and when he is introduced to the media. Before we do, want to thank another couple of sponsors here. Are you looking for a way to challenge your body and sharpen your mind? Step into something more than just a workout. Welcome to the brand new Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy at UFC Gym. Here, it's not just about training. It's about living the values of honor, discipline, and respect. Whether you're a total beginner or leveling up your skills, you'll be guided through a structured program led by a third-degree black belt that builds confidence, strength, and flexibility, and real technique. Head down to UFC Gym at the Waterfront or Market Square to learn about their exclusive 3-month introductory package today. We also want to thank Boss Menswear. Boss Menswear has reached icon status for its tailoring, but offers more than the perfect suit. The collections also feature casual and athleisure pieces, presenting a complete wardrobe for a fast-paced, modern lifestyle. Tailoring and sportswear are brought together in a look that is ready for whatever the day may hold. Boss is now open in Ross Park Mall with a selection of menswear pieces, so check them out, and we will talk to you on the other side. Third segment here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner in for Christopher Carter, speaking with Brian Batko, our Steelers insider at the Post-Gazette. Brian, when we were coming up with third segment topics, you texted me the question, are the Steelers really being more aggressive, or are we just slow to adjust our expectations of them from 2005 or whenever when they brought in James Ferrier, and it was a huge deal to bring in a free agent like that. Now they're making these moves, 3-4 times in off season, well into the summer. Those are things that we aren't used to from them. I chewed on it myself a little bit and thought about that question. I said, this is, the trade they made this week was one of the few moves that they've done recently that had real long-term weight to it. You think about Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, those were 1-year type of situations. Aaron Rodgers is a 1-year situation. There's a lot of low commitment moves with big names that are recognizable in a way that we're not used to with the Steelers, but long term, it didn't necessarily change a ton. I think this trade exists in a different space because you had Minkah sign long term. Jaylen Ramsey is signed long term, so you're kind of flipping one for the other. So I think this trade was certainly different, but I don't know how much they philosophically changed other than being willing to go after some of these bigger names in a way that they weren't before.
Yeah, but I mean, Carter and I talked about this a little on Wednesday's show too, and we'll just piggyback on that a little. It's like it was 50 to 60 years in the making of the Steelers trading a first. Like the last time they had traded a first round pick the way they did for Minka Fitzpatrick, the draft was not what it is today. So in a sense, it was actually unprecedented by them to do that, especially the organization known for producing was probably almost inarguably the greatest NFL draft class of all time. with that 1974. Like, that is what the Steelers do. And Kevin Colbert, not to pull a Les Snead from the Rams, but he was like, F that pick. Let's go get Minka Fitzpatrick. And that was fascinating at the time. So how quickly we do forget some things like that. Even before that, in the previous year's draft, they traded up to get Devin Bush at 10th overall, which was a little out of character for the stay patient, stand pat, trust your scouting and evaluation, you'll get a good player who falls to you type of Steelers. And, that didn't work, but I would say the Minkah move by and large worked. You got an all-pro out of that deal. What were you going to get from, you never know what you're going to get out of a first round pick, any rookie. So I know there are people say, hey, they could have drafted Justin Herbert or Tua that year. Like, I know, but there's a lot of moving parts there. We have no idea if it actually would have turned out that way. So, even some of their signings in recent years to go out and pursue Russell Wilson when Kenny Pickett was still on the roster was quote unquote un-Steelers. Like, the trade deadline moves in recent years were, more bold and aggressive than they had been in previous seasons. And again, that didn't necessarily start with Omar Khan. Kevin Colbert was doing some of these things at the end of his tenure. So, maybe we are just a little bit stuck in our ways of, the Steelers would never do that. They've become too much of a moving target to even really predict what they're going to do. And I give them credit in the sense that it does back up actions to words of, there's a sense of urgency here. We're getting impatient. We need to take the next step. Now, they don't seem to do that with the coaching staff as often as some people think they should, but that's kind of over here, in the roster and personnel churn is over here.
Yeah, we've been making jokes in our editing group that, sometimes we do these videos on some of these players in the offseason because it's a long 6 months. So you got to talk about something. And I believe Jonnu Smith, Jalen Ramsey are guys we did videos about, and the verdict was, nah, probably not.
And do you guys make fun of us, the writers?
No, we were just saying, hey, these are topics we ran out there that maybe we weren't sure about as topics, and then they ended up being very pertinent because the Steelers ended up making those moves. I think Aaron Rodgers early in the offseason, when we were talking so much about Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, we did Aaron Rodgers videos, and people were like, nah, they're not doing Aaron Rodgers. And turned out that ended up being a relevant conversation as well. So, maybe in some ways we are a little slow to adjust, but and I think sometimes, the national dialogue maybe is guiding things more than we sometimes think locally in terms of the big moves they might be pursuing. I think we're a little more plugged in on the team's needs, but when there seems to be momentum nationally for some of these guys, it seems to be that it's not coming from nowhere, within the team. So, Brian, I also wanted to ask you about this. The Steelers pass catchers are going to be working with Aaron Rodgers out in Malibu this week.
They already have been. Yeah, they might actually be closing up shop now.
Can you make up for OTAs, missing OTAs, and the time that they weren't working together for those couple of weeks that Aaron Rodgers wasn't here in an informal setting like that in California? Is that more of a getting to know the guy situation? How do you read them all getting together out there?
I think it's more of a getting to know the guys, because I don't think you can really simulate facing a defense, even if it's a defense that's not bringing you to the ground and you're running through in shorts and that kind of thing. But I think any extra little bit helps, as someone who's been somewhat critical of how long the Rodgers thing took to come together. And to me, it seemed fairly obvious and clear to see that he just didn't feel like going through OTAs and waited until mini camp, and whether the Steelers drew a line in the sand or he just decided like, okay, what's a few days in Pittsburgh before vacation? I don't know, but I give him and I give the guys credit, because I think if I were planning on catching any passes from Aaron Rodgers in 2025, I'd make sure my behind is finding a way to get to Malibu when he invites me out there to learn the hand signals and the head nods and the look and those kind of things. So from what I've been able to kind of suss out, Pat Freiermuth's been posting about being out there. Calvin Austin, Ben Skoranek was on his own Instagram catching a alley-oop off the backboard from Aaron Rodgers at Proactive Sports Performance, where Rodgers always works out at in Southern California. I'm pretty sure I've heard some rumblings that DK Metcalf and Roman Wilson were there too. So Jonnu Smith is in Pittsburgh, or at least he was yesterday or the day before. He posted on his Instagram him in the Pittsburgh airport. So I guess Jaylen Ramsey is too. He posted a photo of the number 5 jersey on Tuesday, and I guess that clears up what number he'll be wearing as a Steeler.
Those guys got to get their last rides in on the tram out at the airport before it's all gone in the fall.
Or a little
Brian, I'll get you out of here on this, Brian. Jaylen Ramsey will be introduced at some point. Certainly one of the more outspoken guys in his NFL career. I think you guys talked about the big personalities on Wednesday's North Shore Drive. What do you want to hear from him when he's introduced in Pittsburgh officially?
I think more than anything, probably just, how do you envision yourself in this defense? What did the Steelers tell you? And, were they able to kind of go through your agent to lay out the plan and the vision for what you would be here with Minkah going out the other way? So that to me is the big question with Ramsey, because you are coming to a team that's got Joey Porter Jr., who probably thinks, hey, I'm chasing that second contract, and I'm going to do it with the Steelers, my hometown team, the team that drafted me a couple years ago. So, no, there's no stopping me from becoming a key piece of the puzzle here. Darius Slay, if he has 1 year left in his NFL career, does he want to be a part-time player? I wouldn't think so. I don't think that was what he imagined for himself when he signed here in March. And then, where does Ramsey fit in with all that? Is he cool with the kind of Rod Woodson move of, you're going to be a safety, and every once in a while we'll move you around? So I think those are going to be the most curious topics for him. I'm less concerned with what fell through with Miami. I mean, I think there's been some decent reporting already done on that, and I had Orlando Alzagari from the Big O show on the Chipped Hammond Football podcast Tuesday with me, and I mean, he made it sound like it's pretty much an open secret down there that Ramsey and Mike McDaniel weren't getting along by the end. So, I'm more concerned with the X's and O's than anything else with Ramsey. And I don't know if they're going to have any sort of introductory press conference for him, or if we'll just have to wait for report day out at St. Vincent College, July 23rd.
Will be interesting to see that. Brian, we're going to do a quick programming note here. Everyone's going on vacation next week, except for Paul Zeiss. So there will be no North Shore Drive, Chipped Hammond Football, or my Thursday show with Jason Mackey. We're just going to have Paul Zeiss minding the store here. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. You can get those shows. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, getting you ready for the ramp up to Steelers training camp in Latrobe. Hit that subscribe button. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that. And we will talk to you again, not too soon, but at some point soon. Take care.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.